Welcome to Digital Resilience Needs Supersede to Detect and Protect. My name is Chris Stoneking. I am the Senior Sales Engineer at Red Seal for the Southeast. In my career, just a little bit about me. I've worked for in network ops and security ops. I've worked for value-added resellers and solution providers, and I've worked for manufacturers. So I have sat on all three sides of that table, sometimes all at once in the same meeting. So we all know that bad stuff happens. The list you see on the screen are a list of data breaches in the last few years. John Chambers stated that there are two types of companies: those who have been hacked and those who don't know they've been hacked. I compiled this list on the screen with minimal research, a few minutes searching on Google, and had to truncate the list for lack of space on the screen to continue. And I didn't continue. These are only data breaches. I didn't include actual hacks like Maersk, happened to Maersk, or ransomware attacks such as Baltimore or City of Atlanta. So we all know bad stuff happens. We have lots of evidence, and most of us look at this list and go there, but for the grace of God, go on. Bad actors seem to have the advantage. One of my favorite quotes, or one that resonates with me, I won't say it's a favorite because it's a little dark, but comes from Rob Joyce, former chief of Tailored Access Operations at National Security Agency. You know the technologies you intended to use in that network. We know the technologies that are actually in use in that network. The bottom line is, when we build networks, a lot of times we build them with a naive assumption that they only, it's something we don't, even if we're smart enough to know that this is not the truth, sometimes we are blind to the fact that there are things going on that we just don't know about. We, on the other hand, most organizations operate under a detect and protect philosophy. And this comes from the very nature of how the market drives solutions for these things. The market inherently drives solutions to be point solutions. I have a problem. I've got a problem with viruses, so we came up with antivirus. I have a problem with DDoS attacks, so we come up with a solution for DDoS attacks. I have a problem for this piece of security or that piece of security, and the market responds by creating a point solution. And point solutions are good. Don't get me wrong. Point solutions are excellent, bring excellent value to the network, but they are inherently point solutions. And unfortunately, the reality is that we have more points that need solutions than we can afford to address. And to top it off, the success criteria for detect and protect means that we must succeed every time. And that's an almost guaranteed failure right there. We have three principal challenges we're going to talk about today. And then at the end of the presentation, or the end of my slides, which are mercifully few, I'll take a look at some solution aspects, some product-driven solution aspects, things we can do with certain solutions in the market. So, first, we don't know our networks nearly as well as we need to. So think for yourself, how long would it take you to answer the following question? Somebody comes to you and says, from within your organization, who signs your paycheck and says, hey, what's the attack surface of my network look like? Hey, are we exposed to network exploit via RDP ports? How many firewalls do we have in operation right now? What percentage of my servers are fully patched? Hey, this guest wireless thing that we have, can they get any place other than guest wireless? I suspect that most of us would take longer to answer some of those questions than we might be comfortable with. And after answering, we even might have some lingering doubts about the accuracy of the answer. If not today's answer, then tomorrow's. You know, is certain, does it change? You know, when I go to sleep at night, when I get up in the morning, did the answer I give yesterday, is it still right? You know, how does it change? How much does it change? And we all wonder, you know, this is something I know that keeps, I'm fairly certain we've all lost a little bit of sleep, or at least shed a few beads of sweat over. We did a survey, Red Seal did a survey of our customer CEOs. And so this kind of helps put this in perspective. We asked CEOs a lot of questions, but one of them was, how many of them believe they had an accurate blueprint of their network? And that came back, 76% of the CEOs believe they had an accurate blueprint of their network infrastructure. So let's think about what that actually means. That means that either they've already asked the question or been told by the network team, here's a picture of our network, and it's accurate. Or they've gone into their office, you know, wandered down the hall and said, hey, show me a picture of my network. What's that look like? And gotten an answer that they've taken at face value as, you know, complete and total picture of their network. Now, we all know, as soon as you put pen to paper, those network maps are obsolete, right? Network maps are highly influenced by, you know, which group does the network map. A firewall guy is going to draw a different map than the router guy. The router guy is going to draw a different map than the switch and infrastructure guy, the access guy. The cloud guy is going to have a totally different map that doesn't look anything like anybody else's. So it's interesting that the confidence of this response was so high when we all know that it's closer to this reality. With Red Seal, one of the things we do is create network models from which we can project a map. And we find nearly 100% of the time that our customers have devices, subnets, access that aren't on anybody's plan, anybody's blueprints, or been totally forgotten about, or never were known in the first place. We just don't know what we don't know. Second week on the job at Red Seal, I went down to see a customer. Lovely people, and I was down there. It was a softball pitch, right? I was going in. My sales guy who'd been with the company for a while said, "Don't worry about it. It'll be good getting your feet wet. You can do a roadmap thing, talking to customers, see how they're doing, maybe make some suggestions about how they can use the product better." So I go down and we're doing all this, and it was great. I had their Red Seal product, console up, and we were looking at it, and I was scrolling through a list of their firewalls, and one of them stopped me and said, "Hey, Chris, what's that?" And I said, "Well, that's a firewall. It looks like a Palo Alto firewall model, such and such, named blah blah blah." I read it off, and he goes, "Well, why is that there?" And I said, "Well, it's there because Red Seal would have gone out and did a data collection. One of the things Red Seal does is actually does data collection on your network devices and pulls in their configurations, and then we use those configurations to build an as-built model of the network." So I said, "Well, it's right here. Here's the timestamp. That means that Red Seal last week sometime went out and did a data collection from that device and talked to it. So it's on the network." And he goes, "No, it's not." And I said, "Well, yeah, it is. Because right there's the timestamp, and I can show you where we got, you know, I can show you the session reference and everything." And he goes, "Well, we decommissioned that firewall 6 months ago." And I said, "Well, you know, here's what it says. You know, Red Seal said it talked to it last week." So he gets up, excuses himself, and goes out. Comes back about 10 minutes later. Turns out their decommissioning process had included unplugging the upstream the upstream patch cable from the firewall, but leaving all of the downstream connections, physical connections to the firewall in place. And of course, we all know why they did this. The firewall guys are putting in new firewalls. They wanted to make sure if something went horribly wrong, they didn't have a whole lot of work to do to go back to what was. So they just unplugged the outside, you know, the public face of that firewall, and left it as is, meaning to come back at some point and take it offline and clean it up. And it never happened. But in the meantime, this was providing access between zones on the trusted side of the firewall. Another example, I went down to a customer who was doing a proof of concept, and we had gotten certain elements of his network modeled, pulled in, and he said, okay, he said, what's next? I said, well, at this point, I like to kind of validate that the network looks like you expect it to look like, and that, you know, we're getting, you know, so we'll take some, throw me a softball, we'll check out some easy stuff and kind of make an assumption that, you know, most of it's working. And he says, okay, easy one. He says, I know that this part of my network, between this part of my network and that part of my network, I only allow port 80, port 443, and port 53. I said, okay, cool, easy enough. And we ran the query in Red Seal, and it comes back, and it should have come back saying, you know, partially open, port 80, port 443, port 53. And it comes back and says, wide open, no controls, no ACLs monitoring this path. And he was like, oh, Chris, that's just not right. So we dug down on it a little bit. And at the end of the day, we found a full Class C network in public IP space. So basically 255 addresses on the internet that had any access into the core of his network. And he was just blown away. And we were sitting there, and he was that just can't be right. That just can't be. Oh, I remember what that is. And I looked at him, and he took a breath, and he said, well, a while back, we changed our phone over to VoIP, a cloud VoIP provider. So it turns out that this Class C address space on the internet was all owned by the cloud voice provider, VoIP provider. And we've probably all been in that room and know how that works. The guys came in, giving them all credit. They came in, they locked everything down, they made the first call, didn't work. Now they're under a time crunch. Why is it not working? I can't really have my president, my vice president, my CEO not being able to make phone calls. So what do? They start ripping out firewall rules. Rip. And they get down to any. And it finally works. And they push back from the table, and they take a deep breath and go, great, it works. We're just going to leave it right here for now. We'll come back and clean it up later. And of course, they never did. So we don't know our networks as well as we should, because there's too much to know. For any one person to put in their head, there's too much to know. Second, there are mountains of data. And there are mountains of products producing mountains of data. This slide is several years old, just kind of shows the landscape of the security software security solution space. I'm sure that they're even bigger by order of magnitude now, and there are probably ones that as many that have fallen off, or as many new ones or as many that have fallen off as there are new ones. For a recent study, you know, the minimum number of security solutions in enterprises is a dozen. Large infrastructures can have 40 or 50. I run into on a regular basis customers going, yeah, my budget's been slashed. I've got to figure out what tools I'm going to keep, what tools I'm going to get rid of. So, you know, we're always on the chopping block from my side. And of course, from the operational side, they're always having to pick and choose which baby they want to keep and which baby they have to throw out into the bulrushes. So, and on top of everything else, most of these are, again, point solutions, and they don't really provide any sort of integrated or holistic view of the situation. And then third, we never have enough network and security mountaineers. We've got tons of tech, we have tons of data, but we don't have enough people to do the analysis. You know, what do? We hire people, but they don't exist. We use fewer products, or we innovate to get more out of existing tech. You know, my brother-in-law is a cybersecurity expert and works for a credit union in the Southeast. Has risen the organization to the point where He now oversees hiring of his own team, cybersecurity team. He literally cannot find qualified staff. Has ultimately decided that the best way to get qualified staff is actually grow them himself. So he's got to find people who are interested, cultivate them, train them, hope that HR doesn't undermine his ability to pay them at the market rate and retain them. And when he can't do that, he has to start all over again. He barely, his complaint, we talk about this on a regular basis, we're down at family gatherings. He says, you know, it's just hard to keep ahead. It's just hard to stay even, much less get ahead. Bonus material. And then we have organizational challenges. You know, our own organizations work against us. You know, we have SecOps and NetOps and separate branches reporting to different VPs with conflicting, you know, competing budgets. We have the not my jobs. I want to help, but I've been told not to. Territorial battles, zero-sum budget games. So what do? We need to shift our way of thinking. Protection and detection are necessary, but no longer sufficient. We need to incorporate the idea of digital resilience into our planning and our organizational builds. We have to assume, digital resilience assumes attacks happen and succeed. Just assumes that from the get-go. It's going to happen, it's already happened, it's already been successful. How do we mitigate the damage and the impact of those attacks? We focus on continual insight and improvement, and we focus on rapid recovery. Digital resilience helps be driven from the top down. Certainly can only be successful, ultimately successful, fully successful when driven from the top down. But it's actually implemented from the bottom up because the mechanics of digital resilience are built at the operational level. It also helps to build organizations that incentivize a holistic view, and I apologize for the jargon, it's just sometimes I just can't get around it. Holistic view of network security and performance. Think about how we naively build organizations. Those of us on the call, we decide to get busy, we get together and we're going to build a company, and say none of us, for sake of discussion, is a networking IT security person. But we know that we need networks, and we know we need IT security, and we know we need some of these things. So what do? Well, you know, one of us has heard we need firewalls, so we go hire a firewall guy. One of us has heard we need routers, so we go hire a router guy. One of us has heard we need, so we've got some regulatory requirements so we go hire a team of regulatory requirement people. And what have we done? Inherently, we have built a siloed infrastructure. And how do businesses typically run? Well, we've got one budget, everybody gets a chunk of it. So now we've built all these silos that we have to budget out, and those budgets are inherently competing with each other. So before we know it, before we've actually taken any active steps, we've actually created an organization that is built from the ground up not to cooperate with each other. And that's a problem. Unfortunately, that's about all I can say about, you know, organization. It's just that, you know, it's definitely something we need to focus on or pay attention to because the innate assumptions that we build organizations with can have very real world impacts. But what I'd really like to focus on for the rest of the talk is the tools and the nature of those tools that we use when we build out these security organizations. So we want to adopt tools that help you know your network. We need to, you know, however that works, right? You need to know your network. You need to know about your network. You need to be able to assess inventory. You need to be able to know the context of the network, how those inventory pieces fit together, how they speak to one another, what surface they present to the world, where the weak points are, where things are vulnerable to attack. We need tools that can help provide these insights across functional groups, across silos. We need to find tools that inherently encourage sharing of information. So, hang on just a second. I'm going to switch over screens here. So, for example, in Red Seal, one of the first things we do is pull in configurations from devices. When we pull in these devices, we run best practice checks. We run them through best practice checks, and we provide these, you know, as like a first level of value that we get in. These are industry standard best practice checks, generally agreed on. If you look at them, you go, oh, well, that makes sense. You know, I shouldn't have a default password. I should have a password on an enable account. I shouldn't have telnet turned on in the device, that sort of thing. With these best practice checks, you can do a couple of things. You can take a look and kind of sort and see where you are actually following best practices and where there are outliers. So this raises questions. Hey, I've got a question for the network guys. You know, I've got a best practice check. I've got 211 devices total. 209 of them have passed, but I've got 2 outliers, 2 failed. So clearly we're following that policy. We're following that best practice check. But why do I have 2 outliers? Are those special cases? Are those goofs? And you take that too. Now, the interesting thing with Red Seal is that we typically end up selling to the security group, because, or the compliance group, or the audit group, or someone on the security side of the table. But this is clearly a network ops challenge, right? We have our security, now our security teams that bought Red Seal take this information and have to communicate, work with the network ops teams. What's the problem with security and network ops working together? Well, they're incentivized in totally opposite ways. Network guys are hired and paid to make bits go. Security people are hired and paid to make bits stop. So it is often difficult and a challenge to get these teams to work together. We actually spend a lot of time at Red Seal when I'm coaching our security users on how to talk to the network guys, the network folks, so that they can offer these up as conversation starters and not rocks to beat them with. Because the last thing we want is these folks to walk in and slam a report down on the desk and say, hey, you got all this crap to fix in your network. That doesn't make any friends, right? Much better to approach that with beer or candy or both, and make it a soft question. Hey, tell me about this. How did you guys do this? Why did you guys do this? Why does this exist? Another way to look at these is exactly the opposite. Look where, and you see I've sorted here. Turn on my highlighter. I've sorted here where you can see I've got 0 pass devices and all my failed devices. So the question there is, why are we not paying any attention at all to this best practice check? And again, this is a conversation. It's an audit done by the security side, but it's a conversation that's definitely going to end at the network ops side. And this is where that building organizations that work well together, that communicate across silos, and realize that the ultimate goal is not only making the bits pass as fast as possible, or only locking everything down so nothing bad happens, but working together so that we have an effective and secure organization is key. And tools like this can help encourage that when used properly. Another example is the risk. So we take, along with we pull in configurations from the network devices, and we build a model of the network as it is built. We also pull in vulnerability data from your vulnerability scanner and present to you different ways to look at that vulnerability data. So this is a picture, a visual picture of a typical vulnerability scan sorted by, presented by CVSS score, okay? This is what you usually get. You know, reds are high CVSS scores, greens are low CVSS scores. And as you can see, there's not really anything that jumps out. The red certainly stands out, but it doesn't really suggest where to start with the red. And this is a fairly small network for pieces. RedSeal can take and sort this. And actually, because we put these vulnerability scores in the context of the network, we can see for a given host with a given vulnerability, can it be reached? What else can it reach in the network? And create a score that that indicates where a single host or a single group of hosts have inordinate amounts of access to the rest of the network, where there are also hosts with risk in them, and we can point to those. So in this case, we have one that pops up right here. We have a score called downstream risk that suggests that basically if I was to patch that one host, I would get rid of a huge amount of risk in my network. I'd be closing a door that had hallways off of it to a lot of other hosts that could also be accessed. So this is the kind of thing, again, you want to use tools and look at tools that help you do deep insight and analytics in your network and see very quickly, where do I spend my resources, which are rare. We've already talked about that. How do I best use these things? How do I best create complete strategies that are not just host focused, or not just network focused, or not just perimeter focused, but incorporate elements of all of those, so that you know, you make good decisions, make smart decisions. All right, I'm gonna hop back over to my slides. Actually, I believe that was it. So I'll stop there. Any questions?